Mr. President, Your Honors, at the beginning of this trial, 3 years ago, the Office of the Prosecutor submitted that the evidence will prove beyond any reasonable doubt that between the 6th of August, 2002, and the 31st of December, 2003, Bosco Ntaganda, a notorious commander known as the Terminator, is criminally responsible for crimes against civilians and for the systematic recruitment and use of children under the age of 15 as soldiers in his armed group, and for their rape and sexual slavery. Today, we stand before this chamber to submit that the evidence has proven beyond all reasonable doubt that Bosco Ntaganda is indeed guilty of the crimes charged against him. The evidence tendered during trial proves the truth of witness P. 859's testimony to the court. The UPC's sole objective was to target the Balendu. Everybody knew that. It was the Lendus who were the real targets. This is what P. 859 said. The evidence, Mr. President, proves the truth of rape victim P19's testimony, which I recall here. Did you hear the UPC soldiers talking about the rapes? He said, yes, they talked about it. What did they say? He answered, they said that the Lendu were useless wild animals and we can do with them anything we want. They are not humans. Mr. President, the evidence proves the truth of witness P105's testimony of the UPC's murder of nearly 50 people, mainly Lendu, in Kobu in February of 2003. I quote, "A lot of people were executed by hand with machetes. They used strength to execute them. Some of them were disemboweled, even pregnant women as well. They took the fetus out of the women. And you don't use a rifle to do that. You use something else in order to disembowel a woman. All that made me very sad. The civilian population arrived to identify their families. It created great sorrow," the witness said. The evidence supports UPC Commander P768's testimony that the accused explained to UPC troops that the Lendu were the enemy and that, unquote, you had to kill them and eliminate them. The evidence presented at trial exposes the full spectrum of the UPC's targeted and violent crimes committed in two main charged attacks, as well as against children within its own ranks. The crimes, Mr. President, were not random. They were neither isolated or spontaneous. They were part of a carefully planned, coordinated, and executed campaign of violence, deliberately targeting the Lendu and the Ngiti civilian populations and other non-Hema ethnic groups. Deliberately targeting youth, including children under the age of 15, to recruit, use, rape, and sexually enslave in its forces. Mr. President, Your Honors, these proceedings would not have been possible were it not for the courage and commitment of the witnesses who have come before you to testify. Those who were raped, enslaved, maimed, and pillaged. Those whose loved ones were killed by the UPC. Those whose children were recruited, used, raped, or sexually enslaved by the UPC, and of those who were members of the perpetrator group and have told you of the crimes that they and their fellow soldiers and commanders committed during the conflict. The pursuit of justice and the establishment of the youth in these proceedings owes such individuals a debt of gratitude for their truthfulness, their willingness to come forward and tell the court what they know and of their experiences. Mr. President, Your Honors, Bosco Ntaganda and his co-perpetrators conceived a plan to assume the military and political control of Ituri and expel the non-Hema civilian population. By controlling Ituri, they not only had significant military and political reach, they also gained enormous economic power. Power meant to benefit themselves and the Hema community. The Lendu, Ngiti, and non-Hema civilian population stood in the way of this plan. Bosco Ntaganda and those who joined him drove out non-Hema civilian population to gain control of the territory, aiming to ensure that they would not return. Bosco Ntaganda and his co-perpetrators not only terrorized the civilian population, they terrorized their own troops. They forced the children in their army to kill. They treated them cruelly. They raped and sexually enslaved them. Witness P758, who was only 13 at the time, poignantly described for the chamber the pervasive and degrading sexual violence within the UPC. And I quote her testimony. Was any term used to describe the female soldiers? She was asked, and she answered, yes. What was the term? They called us the Guduria. She was questioned, why did they call you Guduria? She said, because soldiers who wanted to could sleep with us, and that's why they called us Guduria. She was questioned further, what is a Guduria? And she answered, Guduria is a cooking pot in which you prepare soldiers' food. And when she was further questioned about how did you feel when you heard people refer to you and other women and girls at the camp as Guduria, she answered, I didn't feel well. It wasn't a good name to call somebody. It's a very bad name. It means that the food prepared in this cooking pot is eaten by any soldier. And that's how they treated us. Any person who wanted to sleep with us could do so. That was her testimony. Mr. President, this is a landmark case in recognizing that the rape and sexual slavery of soldiers by members of the same armed group is a war crime for which this court is empowered to prosecute and convict. The evidence presented at trial proves these horrific sexual crimes beyond reasonable doubt and proves Bosco Ntaganda's criminal responsibility for them. On the strength of the prosecution's evidence in this case, which I submit confidently meets the applicable standard of proof at trial, the accused must be convicted for the crimes charged. Mr. President, Your Honors, the evidence shows that Bosco Ntaganda was one of the highest and the most experienced military commanders in the UPC. He planned, he coordinated, and commanded the two attacks of November 2002 and February of 2003 with Floribert Kisembo and other UPC commanders. The evidence supports UPC soldier P907's testimony that Bosco Ntaganda planned the war and was in charge of all the war operations. The evidence supports the accused's own testimony when asked if he was viewed as the real operational leader of the army, to which he replied, Bosco Ntaganda said, "I was a tactician. I certainly accept that." The evidence proves that Bosco Ntaganda personally committed crimes. He persecuted and attacked civilians. He murdered them, pillaged their goods, destroyed their churches and hospitals. He enlisted and used children under the age of 15 to participate directly in hostilities. He also made other essential contributions to the common plan to assume military and political control of Ituri and drive out the UPC enemies that included the Lendu, Nande, and other non-Hema civilian population. He recruited, trained, and organized the army, distributed weapons and ammunition, deployed troops, ensured compliance with orders, developed UPC's communication ability, issued orders to attack, pillage, rape, persecute, and kill, and induced the commission of crimes. Crimes of this scale and of this nature required Bosco Ntaganda's direct commission and his essential contribution to their planning and organization. They required Bosco Ntaganda's will to be executed. As a military commander, Bosco Ntaganda failed to prevent or punish the crimes committed by the troops under his effective command and control. His orders were executed automatically. He knew, or should have known, that his troops were committing or were about to commit the crimes. These were the same troops that had committed crimes in other attacks, using the same brutal tactics. While Bosco Ntaganda conceded that he could discipline his soldiers at any time, he did not discipline any soldier for the charged crimes. Mr. President, Your Honors, despite the defense claims to the contrary during trial, this was an exemplary trial in terms of fairness. The accused chose an experienced legal team to represent him during the proceedings. He had the full and early disclosure of the prosecution's witness statements and expert forensic and documentary evidence. He had the opportunity to cross-examine the prosecution witnesses, and he did so. He fully tested the evidence that incriminates him. Mr. Ntaganda was also given full opportunity to present his own witnesses, evidence, and arguments, and he testified at great length in his own defense. The chamber took reasonable and necessary measures to address indications of witness interference or disclosure of confidential information by the accused or his associates. The chamber restricted the accused's telephone contacts and visits during the trial and regularly reviewed the ongoing need for the restrictions. The chamber's decisions were fair and ensured the integrity of the trial. There is no doubt that this chamber ensured a fair trial, which is a cornerstone for the authority of the International Criminal Court. To conclude, Mr. President, Your Honors, the evidence in this case proves beyond reasonable doubt that Bosco Ntaganda is guilty of the charged crimes, and the prosecution asks Your Honor to so find. My colleague, Ms. Nicole Sampson, the senior trial lawyer of the case, will now present overviews of the evidence adduced at trial and the scope of the charges. She will also summarize the evidence relating to the charged crimes committed during the first attack in November of 2002. Ms. Marion Rabanit will then address the Chamber on the evidence relating to the second attack in February of 2003. Ms. Christy Sim will elaborate on the evidence of the crimes against children in the ranks of the UPC. And Ms. Diane Looping will reveal the evidence of the accused individual criminal responsibility for the charged crimes, for his direct and co-perpetration of them, for his orders and his inducement to commit crimes, and for his contributions to the commission of crimes by persons acting with a common purpose under Article 25. Mr. Eric Iverson will then present the key evidence and issues relevant to the accused's individual criminal responsibility as a military commander under Article 28. I thank you, Mr. President, Your Honors.